Welcome to this week's edition of Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up, your trusted source for high-impact stories from the front lines of global espionage, foreign interference, sabotage, and national security. Neil Bisson, a retired CSIS intelligence officer and director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network, draws on over 25 years of frontline experience to decode the world's most pressing intelligence developments and what they mean for your country, your safety, and your future. This week, we're covering the globe. From Britain's appointment of the first female chief of MI6 to Mossad operatives reportedly filming sabotage missions inside Iran. The Brazil coup trial takes a darker turn with allegations of political spying, and new intelligence from Russia accuses China of espionage, a dramatic twist in the so-called No Limits partnership. Back home in Canada, the Canadian Security Intelligence Service releases its 2024 public report, and the message is clear: Canada is now a prime target on the world stage. Meanwhile, the G7 summit in Alberta wraps with leaders pledging new action on migrant smuggling, hybrid threats, and AI-driven foreign interference. From undersea cable sabotage in the North Atlantic to executions in Tehran and digital propaganda battles online, this week's episode dives deep into the global shadow war reshaping our world. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome back to the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. I'm your host, Neil Bisson, a retired intelligence officer with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the director of the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. Each week, I provide insight, analysis, and intelligence on the world's latest espionage, national security, sabotage, and terrorism stories, to give you a peek behind the curtain of what the world's intelligence organizations are doing and how it affects your country, your career, and your safety. It's been a busy week. From the G7 discussions on national security in Kananaskis, Alberta, to the increasing fighting between Iran and Israel, to the appointment of a new head of MI6 in the United Kingdom. So let's get to it. For the first story this week, we head to England, where we spotlight a major shift in leadership inside one of the world's most well-known intelligence services. Blaise Metrelli has just been named the new head of MI6, Britain's foreign intelligence agency, making history as the world's first woman to ever lead the organization. Metrelli steps into the role at a critical time, with the UK facing rising threats from hostile states, cyber actors, and geopolitical instability. In this segment, we'll take a closer look at who she is, why her appointment matters, and what it could mean for future British and Allied intelligence operations. Blaise Metrelli's appointment as the Chief of the Secret Intelligence Service, or MI6, is not just a symbolic milestone. It's a signal of continuity and capability. Known within the service by her codename C, she brings over 2 decades of experience in both operational and strategic roles. Most recently, she serves as the Director of Operations, where she has overseen MI6's global intelligence gathering efforts. From an intelligence perspective, leadership changes at the top of any major spy agency always carry significance. They impact interagency coordination, operational priorities, and the tone of relationships with Five Eyes partners like Canada, United States, Australia, and New Zealand. Metrelli's background suggests she'll focus on strengthening offensive cyber capabilities and deepening global partnerships, especially at a time when Russian aggression, Chinese influence operations, and Iranian proxy activity are all increasing in intensity. MI6, officially known as the Secret Intelligence Service, has historically been male-dominated. Only recently has the UK intelligence community begun pushing for more inclusivity at the senior levels. Metrelli's rise mirrors broader efforts within the Five Eyes community to modernize leadership structures and reflect the diverse nature of the threats they face. This change also comes amid growing public scrutiny over how intelligence services operate, particularly in the digital space. Metrelli will likely have to navigate the delicate balance between operational secrecy and the growing calls for public accountability, especially in a democracy increasingly wary of surveillance overreach. The Al Jazeera article includes insights from security experts who note that Metrelli has a reputation of being a serious operator, someone respected both with MI6 and by Britain's international intelligence partners. Her experience in handling complex field operations, including high-risk theaters, has reportedly earned her praise from allies across the Five Eyes network. Drawing on my own background in intelligence, I'll add this. Metrelli's appointment is likely to resonate far beyond the UK. Allies will be looking closely at whether she brings a more forward-leaning approach to countering foreign interference, especially given MI6's crucial role in the global human collection. If she doubles down on offensive, cyber, and covert influence operations, we could see a ripple effect across the Allied services, including Canada's. Canada and the US have been well aware of how foreign interference has been a threat to the democratic systems in North America. Blaise Metrelli's historic appointment marks a new chapter for Britain's MI6. But beyond the headlines, her elevation represents continuity, professionalism, and a sharpened focus on modern intelligence challenges. As adversaries to Western nations evolve, so must those who guard against them, and Metrelli's seems poised to do that. Her tenure could set the tone for how Western intelligence adapts to the next generation of geopolitical conflict. We now head to the Middle East, where we turn our attention to the deepening shadow conflict between Iran and Israel. Iran has launched a sweeping internal security crackdown, claiming that it has uncovered a network of Mossad operatives working inside the country. One alleged spy has already been executed, and others are under arrest. Tehran's claims paint a vivid picture of infiltration agents disguised as delivery drivers using hats, sunglasses, and even fake packages to carry out their missions. But beyond the theatrics lie a much more serious intelligence battle that's unfolding behind the scenes. Iran's latest counterintelligence operations come amid mounting pressure from repeated covert strikes, including drone attacks and cyber intrusions, which it attributes to Israel's Mossad. These arrests are part of a broader attempt to reassure the public and reassert regime control following a string of humiliating security breaches, many of which have targeted key military and nuclear sites. The fact that Iran has gone so far as to publicly execute one of the alleged Mossad collaborators signals just how serious the regime views this threat. But it also speaks to a deeper level of paranoia, one that's not entirely unfounded. Israel's intelligence services have a long history of using advanced tradecraft and deep cover operatives to conduct espionage inside hostile territory, and in recent months, there's been an uptick in sophisticated operations that have struck at the heart of Iran's air defense and drone programs. The ongoing intelligence war between Israel and Iran isn't new, but it's evolving. Earlier this year, Israel launched a major retaliatory operation that blended conventional airstrikes with covert sabotage. Mossad was reportedly instrumental in smuggling drones into Iranian territory and coordinating attacks on key infrastructure. This hybrid model, combining kinetic and clandestine tactics, has exposed significant vulnerability in Iran's internal security. In response, Tehran has doubled down on surveillance, informant networks, and political messaging that cast dissent as espionage. But in doing so, it risks alienating its own population and creating an atmosphere of fear that could undermine broader stability. Analysts have noted that Iran's response reflects a blend of real threat awareness and political necessity. Publicizing the idea of Israeli spies in disguise helps the regime galvanize support and justify repressive measures. But it also suggests Iran's counterintelligence agencies are struggling to keep pace with the sophisticated external threats. From a professional standpoint, these developments illustrate a key reality. When covert actions consistently breach hardened targets, the adversary is forced to retreat inward and often overreact. Iran's sweeping arrests and executions may reflect desperation more than dominance. If Mossad has indeed gained the level of operational freedom within Iran, the implications for future conflict escalations are profound. Iran's paranoia about Israel's spies sound theatrical, but it's rooted in a very real intelligence contest. With one alleged Mossad operative executed and others under arrest, Tehran is sending a message to its people and to its enemies that it's still in control. But the deeper truth may be unsettling. Mossad's ability to operate inside Iran undetected until after the fact reveals a dangerous imbalance in capability. This is a shadow war playing out in alleys, airports, and encrypted apps, not just on the battlefield. And it's a reminder that in modern intelligence, perception and paranoia often go hand in hand. For our next story, we're sticking with the conflict between Iran and Israel as we delve into a bold statement from Mossad. The Israeli intelligence agency has revealed video footage showing agents operating on Iranian soil. According to Mossad, the operatives deployed precision attack systems against Iran's air defense infrastructure, suggesting a level of infiltration and offensive capability previously unacknowledged by either side. The footage released by Mossad portrays two agents in Iran deploying systems specifically designed to disable the country's air defense network. This fits within a broader Israeli strategy that combines Mossad's covert operations with the Israeli Air Force overt capabilities. By neutralizing air defense elements from the inside, Mossad effectively paved the way for Israeli airstrikes with minimum resistance. This public acknowledgement signals a strategic shift. Mossad is embracing visibility for its clandestine actions. In doing so, it not only takes credit for operational success, but also sends a message of deterrence to potential adversaries and international observers. It highlights a coordinated and modern intelligence campaign that leverages both covert human activity and conventional military power. This revelation follows a series of events earlier this month, collectively known as Operation Rising Lion, when Israel launched coordinated airstrikes against Iranian missile and nuclear-related sites. Before the strikes, Mossad had reportedly smuggled drones and precision weapons into Iran, deployed teams, and set up covert launch zones near Tehran. These teams allegedly disabled key Iranian systems, enabling airstrikes to proceed with reduced pushback from Iran's defenses. The significance of this deployment is profound. Not only does it mark the first admission of Mossad targeting Iran from the inside, but it also demonstrates a new hybrid warfare model. Intelligence and sabotage deployed just before and during air campaigns dramatically increase the effectiveness of kinetic strikes. Intelligence analysts are describing this combination of covert action and open military operations as a tactical game changer. One analyst noted that by publicizing footage of operatives on the ground, Mossad isn't just demonstrating capability, it's shaping perceptions of omnipresence and reach. When you can operate inside an enemy's territory undetected in strike, the psychological impact can be almost as powerful as the physical damage. By stepping forward with proof, Mossad may be recalibrating its posture, not hiding in the shadows, but spotlighting its effectiveness as a deterrent and signal to both Iran and other adversaries. Mossad's unveiling of internal operations in Iran signifies a notable shift, one where covert action is no longer strictly behind the scenes. Instead, they are increasingly part of an open strategic narrative. When paired with air capabilities, such operations offer Israel a layered, highly potent model of modern warfare. The big questions now are, how will Iran continue to respond? Will this spark a new cat and mouse cycle of internal purges, counterintelligence crackdowns, or even covert reprisals? And how will the other regional players perceive or react to this unveiling of Israel's intel offensive? Stay tuned, because with this latest conflict in the Middle East, the lines between spycraft, sabotage, and kinetic strikes are blurring faster than ever. We're heading to Brazil for our next story, where we examine news that's grabbing global headlines. Former President Jair Bolsonaro is under scrutiny again, this time not just for his alleged role in an attempted coup, but now for allegedly weaponizing the Brazilian intelligence agency for political gain. With a coup trial already underway, new accusations are emerging that Bolsonaro used Brazil's ABIN, its equivalent to CSIS, to monitor opponents, judges, and journalists while in office. According to the Brazilian Federal Police, Bolsonaro and a group of senior officials are suspected of running a criminal organization within the Brazilian Intelligence Agency, or the ABIN. Their mission? Allegedly using state surveillance tools to spy on perceived enemies, including Supreme Court justices, political rivals, and media figures. This development adds another explosive layer to Bolsonaro's ongoing legal troubles. While the coup investigation centers on efforts to overturn Brazil's 2022 election results, this intelligence scandal strikes at the very foundation of state power, the abuse of national intelligence assets for political purposes. From an intelligence perspective, this kind of politicization of a domestic spy agency is a red flag, one that draws clear comparisons to authoritarian regimes where intelligence bodies act as tools of political repression rather than protectors of national security. Brazil's ABIN is supposed to be an apolitical body focused on protecting Brazil's national interests. However, under Bolsonaro's administration, there were persistent allegations of overreach, including surveillance of journalists and opposition figures. This isn't an isolated case globally. We've seen accusations in countries like Turkey, Venezuela, and even democratic states where intelligence services were drawn into political battles, often undermining public trust and the integrity of the services themselves. The latest Brazilian case also echoes concerns raised during Bolsonaro's term, particularly his confrontational stance towards democratic institutions and the judiciary. His support base within the military and intelligence circles has long been a source of concern for Brazil's democratic resilience. In a statement, the Brazilian Federal Police described the use of the ABIN resources as a part of a criminal organization that systematically collected intelligence on political targets. The Supreme Court has already accepted the police's request to investigate Bolsonaro's direct role. Commentators in Brazil are warning that this could lead to serious institutional consequences. One senior journalist called it the most dangerous kind of democratic backsliding, when the state's covert powers are turned inward against its own people. From my experience, once intelligence agencies become politicized, it's incredibly difficult to restore their legitimacy, and it creates ripple effects, weakening the rule of law, eroding public confidence, and emboldening other would-be autocrats to misuse their own national security institutions. Brazil is now contending with two massive allegations against its former president, both of which cut to the core of its democracy. One involves the alleged plot to overturn election results, the other involves the abuse of state surveillance powers for personal and political purposes. This story serves as a powerful reminder. Intelligence agencies must operate within strict legal frameworks and democratic oversight. Without that, they risk becoming tools of repression, not protection. As Brazil's investigations unfold, we'll be watching closely. Because when intelligence is misused for politics, democracy becomes a collateral damage. We're returning to the Middle East for our next story, where Iran has executed yet another man it accuses of working for Israel's Mossad. The executed man, Mohsen Langanishin, was convicted of espionage and sabotage-related activities, including helping orchestrate a high-profile assassination and planning attacks against key Iranian infrastructure. This story adds another layer to the ongoing shadow war between Iran and Israel, a war fought in silence, proxies, and quiet eliminations. Iranian authorities allege that Langanishin was allegedly involved in Israel's intelligence services from 2020 until his arrest in 2023. He reportedly helped Mossad agents inside Iran by procuring items such as surveillance vehicles, establishing safe houses, and relaying tactical intelligence. Most notably, he was accused of aiding in the assassination of Colonel Hassan Saeed Kodi of the IRGC in 2022, a bold daylight killing in Tehran that Iran has repeatedly blamed on Israel. Langanishin was also linked to an alleged Israeli drone operation against the defense site in Isfahan, a key hub in Iran's military-industrial network. These actions, according to the Iranian judiciary, constituted clear acts of espionage and treason. The punishment was death by hanging, the latest in a string of such executions that Tehran says are meant to deter further infiltration. This is not an isolated case. Langanishin is the latest in a growing list of individuals executed by Iran on charges of spying for Mossad or other foreign intelligence agencies. Earlier this year, several other Iranian nationals met the same fate under similar accusations. Many of them cybersecurity specialists, engineers, or people with technical access to sensitive facilities. These executions form part of a broader pattern of tightening internal control, particularly as the Iranian regime seeks to demonstrate its ability to defend against what it sees as relentless external subversion. But concerns persist. Human rights organizations and legal observers continue to challenge the fairness of these trials, raising alarms over reports of forced confessions and a lack of due process. The Iranian government's refusal to provide full transparency about these cases only deepens the suspicion that many of these executions serve a political purpose as much as a legal one. While Iranian authorities claim that these actions are essential to safeguard national security, critics say they also serve a public relations function, showing strength at home while sending a warning to adversaries abroad. From an intelligence standpoint, these cases illustrate the profound depth of Mossad's operational reach inside Iran, a capability that continues to confound Tehran's security services. But they also highlight Iran's willingness to respond not only to counterintelligence, but with public displays of state power designed to maintain internal discipline and external deterrence. The execution of Mohsen Langanishin is yet another chapter in the covert war between Iran and Israel, a war where both sides use spies, sabotage, and targeted killings to undermine one another. It raises key questions about how intelligence is used and abused in regimes with limited judicial oversight. And it reminds us that in the shadows of geopolitics, human lives are often the currency of confrontation. As these operations continue to unfold, we'll continue to watch, because on the Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up, every execution, every accusation, and every covert strike tells us something about the state of the world and where it could be heading next. In a major pivot, we head to Moscow to discuss their strained ties with Beijing, as Moscow has now accused China of serious espionage, marking a historic fracture in what was once dubbed the no-limits partnership between Putin and Xi. A leaked internal memo from Russia's FSB reportedly brands China as an active enemy and accuses Beijing of stealing sensitive military secrets, ranging from drone systems to Cold War-era aerospace projects. Even more striking is Moscow's allegations that China might harbor territorial designs on Siberia, highlighted by China's place names cropping up on local maps. Despite continued public displays of unity, most recently during Victory Day parades, this internal leak signals deep mistrust. Behind the scenes, Russian intelligence is growing increasingly alarmed about China's growing influence across Siberia, Central Asia, and Arctic, regions Moscow once considered firmly within its sphere. Once hailed as a dual counterbalance to the West, the China-Russia axis now resembles a pragmatic alignment with mounting tensions underneath. Historically, uneasy relations tarnished by past borders are resurfacing. Economically, Moscow relies on China for trade and technology, but in military and strategic domains, suspicion has deepened. This isn't the first hint of friction. Cyber espionage campaigns have previously hit Russia, state agencies, and China's economic leverage across pipelines, dual-use technology, and Arctic investments has begun to feel less like partnership and more like dependency. Western analysts now suggest that Russia is effectively the junior partner in the alliance, hemmed in by Beijing's rising global ambitions. Some observers even warn Moscow risks falling victim to what one critic calls silent colonization. While both states continue to publicly affirm their no-limits friendship, these leaks show a far more conditional, cautious relationship. An FSB brief titled "China is the Enemy" suggests Moscow's deep unease that Beijing is quietly undercutting its power, not to mention vying for influence in strategic Siberian provinces. From an intelligence perspective, the revelation underscores a classic strategic dilemma. When one ally grows disproportionately stronger, rivalry soon follows. The question now is whether this leak marks a turning point or simply a secret fissure in a still cooperative facade. Russia's espionage accusations against China reveal that even close authoritarian partnerships are vulnerable to the broader dynamics of power and distrust. In the covert world of intelligence, today's allies can feel like tomorrow's threats. Keep in mind, in diplomacy and espionage, what's visible is rarely the full picture. We'll continue to monitor whether this tension leads to deeper decoupling or if Moscow and Beijing manage to bury their misgivings once again beneath the surface. Our next story takes us to the United Kingdom, where a new report warns that the UK is dangerously exposed to state-backed sabotage targeting undersea internet cables, critical arteries of global data flow, and the threats are traced directly to China and Russia. The China Strategic Risks Institute examined a dozen suspected sabotage attempts between January 2021 and April 2025. In 10 of those, vessels linked to Russia or China via flag registration or shell companies were involved. These shadow fleet ships are part of a growing trend in gray zone operations, covert, deniable actions that destabilize without provoking outright war. UK cable systems are vital. They handle nearly all international communications and banking. The UK hosts dozens of undersea cables linking North America and Europe, making it a likely future target. But here's the catch. The UK surveillance is patchy. Radar only covers 22% of its exclusive economic zone, meaning much of the activity goes undetected. And legal structures date back to the 19th century, making prosecution of sabotage impractical under current international law. While physical damage to cables often comes from fishing nets or anchors, the strategic threat from state-aligned vessels is especially concerning. Similar incidences in the Baltic Sea and near Taiwan suggest coordinated efforts to probe Western critical infrastructure. Britain has begun investing in specialized ships like the Royal Fleet's auxiliary surveillance vessels, but experts say maritime gray zone defense remains severely behind the curve, especially compared to Taiwan, which has led the field in countering these tactics. Security analysts stressed that this is about routine maritime operation. It's part of a broader pattern of hybrid warfare designed to weaken nations without triggering war. One warning from Britain's own strategic review called the situation woefully inadequate for detecting such covert threats. Moving forward, experts say the UK must invest heavily in maritime surveillance, improve legal frameworks, and partner closely with allies experienced in gray zone defense. These concerns should be echoed by Canada, as we are woefully undersourced for radar monitoring in our own undersea cables as well. In the digital era, undersea cables are as critical as power lines or highways. The new report paints a stark warning. Without urgent upgrades and monitoring, legal clarity, and allied cooperation, the UK risks a devastating disruption, triggered not by accident, but by deliberate sabotage. In intelligence and national security, what you don't see can hurt you. And in this case, that could be hundreds of billions in economic fallout. We head back to Canada for our next story, where we take a closer look at the just-released CSIS public report for 2024. This annual report is a comprehensive and candid snapshot of national security threats facing Canada and how our domestic intelligence service is responding. From state-backed sabotage and espionage to violent extremism and youth radicalization, the report paints a clear picture. Canada is no longer a peripheral target, it's a primary one. The CSIS report acknowledges what many in the intelligence community have long warned. Threats to Canada's national security are intensifying and becoming more complex. The service points directly at China, Russia, India, Iran, and Pakistan as the most active perpetrators of foreign interference, espionage, and transnational repression. These aren't theoretical concerns. They're active operations targeting our democratic institutions, our research sector, and our diaspora communities. CSIS also highlights its involvement in disrupting multiple Daesh-inspired terrorist plots last year, including one that allegedly targeted Jewish communities in the United States. Perhaps even more concerning is the increasing trend of youth radicalization, driven by online echo chambers and extremist narratives. On the legislative front, the report details how the passage of C-70 has finally begun to modernize CSIS's authority, allowing for threat reduction measures, or TRMs, and resiliency disclosures to non-government partners, like provincial governments and private industry. In short, CSIS is being more proactive, more transparent, and more engaged with partners across Canada than ever before. 2024 marks CSIS's 40th anniversary, and the report includes a detailed retrospective on how the service has evolved since Cold War beginnings. What once focused primarily on Soviet espionage is now shifted towards cyber-enabled threats, disinformation, and covert operations by state proxies. The service's collaboration with law enforcement and its involvement in the public inquiry into foreign interference also underscores how intelligence is now playing a more public role. The report reveals that CSIS provided over 10,000 classified documents and more than 70 hours of testimony at the public inquiry for foreign interference, the largest intelligence release in Canadian history. The new director, Dan Rogers, did not mince his words. He warns that Canada must be clear-eyed about the reality of the threat landscape, knowing that never in history have so many national security challenges converged at once. The deputy director, Vanessa Lloyd, also highlights the service's renewed focus on sabotage and economic security, suggesting that hostile actors are now embedding themselves in Canada's private sector, supply chains, research institutions, and immigration streams. The 2024 CSIS report serves as both a wake-up call and a progress report. Canada is making strides in modernizing its intelligence capabilities, but the threats are growing faster. Foreign states are more aggressive, violent extremism is on the rise, and Canadians, particularly our younger generations, are increasingly vulnerable to radicalization and manipulation. Expect this report to shape national security policy, especially as the newly formed federal government begins to pass laws through Parliament. As always, I'll be watching to see how CSIS and the rest of the Canadian intelligence community maintains our safety, sovereignty, and prosperity. For our last story this week, we'll stay in Canada, where the world leaders met at the 51st G7 Summit in Kananaskis, Alberta, issuing a joint pledge to address growing threats, from migrant smuggling networks to foreign interference tied to AI and disinformation campaigns. The G7 declaration committed the member states to stepped-up cooperation to dismantle human trafficking and migrant smuggling networks. This reflects growing concern over how illicit networks not only endanger lives, but can also be exploited by foreign intelligence services to facilitate covert movement and influence operations. Interestingly, the summit statement also underscores commitments around AI governance, as leaders agree on a framework aimed at guiding the safe deployment of artificial intelligence. This makes the document a rare intersection of migration, smuggling, security, and tech, highlighting how AI can be manipulated in service of covert foreign campaigns. Held June 16th and 17th in Kananaskis, this marked the first G7 summit on Canadian soil since 2002. Against the backdrop of ongoing geopolitical tension and overlapping crises like Ukraine and the Middle East, the migration pledge aligns with the G7's broader ambition to counter hybrid threats. These include mixing disinformation, clandestine influence, and tactical use of migrant routes to destabilize democracies. This coordinated approach signals a strategic shift, Border security is no longer solely about immigration control, but integrated into global counter-espionage and national security strategies. By coupling smuggling enforcement with AI controls, the G7 acknowledges that tech platforms and networks can be exploited by malign actors, not just smugglers, but intelligence services and influence groups. The G7's vow to tackle migrant smuggling alongside foreign interference and AI governance isn't just a political talking point. It's a recognition that today's security threats are multi-layered and interconnected. Expect Washington, Ottawa, and other capitals to build new task forces and tech-driven alliances to implement this pledge in the coming months. Well, that's going to do it for this week. As always, links to the open source stories are in the transcript. Until next week, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.
That's a wrap for this week's Global Intelligence Weekly Wrap-Up. From Mossad's bold operations inside Iran, to Brazil's explosive revelations about political surveillance, to cracks forming in the Russia-China alliance, this episode underscores just how volatile and interconnected the global intelligence landscape has become. Canada's own CSIS report confirms it. We are no longer on the sidelines. We are at the center of a high-stakes contest involving foreign interference, youth radicalization, and sabotage. And with the G7 now pledging to confront hybrid threats and AI-enabled manipulation, the world's democracies are playing catch-up in a race that never stopped. Delivering this level of insight every week takes time, experience, and commitment, built on over 25 years in intelligence and law enforcement, and focused on helping you see beyond the headlines. If you found value in today's episode, please consider sharing it, subscribing, or leaving a review. It helps amplify the signal and brings this critical analysis to a wider audience. You can also support the podcast directly on Buzzsprout or through Patreon. Every contribution keeps the work independent and focused on what matters. For more training, resources, and intelligence-driven insight, visit the Global Intelligence Knowledge Network. Until next week, as Neil always reminds us, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe.